There was once a time when I used to predict the future through elections. Were you right, Grandpa? Uh, I'm not sure. That's me 60 years from now. Anyways, guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Political Junkie 2414. Hope you guys are having a great day. Happy Rosh Hashanah weekend. I mean, I guess it's not really. It is technically a weekend holiday. I'm not Jewish, but I just wanted to recognize it. So today we're going to be doing another video. This is going to be kind of just like a look at the generic ballot, a look at the new polls that have been coming out, and if you're wondering why I might sound a little weird, I have got an Invisalign in my teeth. You know, the Invisalign, not braces, but you know what I mean. The uh, the the tooth set, I guess you could say. You know what I mean. So, anyways, it's gonna make me sound a little weird. I'm gonna be a lot more thirsty. And yeah, so if I sound a little weird, sorry about that, but I'm sure you guys will get used to it. And yeah, nothing's really gonna change here. The worst part is that the water doesn't get to my teeth through the retainer. That's the worst part. So, anyways, getting right down to it, we're going to be talking about the new polls that have been coming out recently, showing Democrats in a much better position than they were just a little while ago in some races, and but in others they are struggling. So, we're going to take a look at the generic ballot first, and Democrats are now up by 2 points. Yes, your eyes do not deceive you. 2 points now. And I've been saying that I think that this lead is possibly going to grow. It's been getting better for Democrats as the days go on. Republicans had a lead in the generic ballot from all the way from just like a week after Glenn Youngkin's victory in Virginia, or 2 weeks actually, and they had the lead in the generic ballot. Even when the Roe leak itself came out, the Dobbs decision didn't really affect the Republicans that much. You can see that they actually gained here on 538's forecast, but when they actually did overturn it on June 24th, you saw, or you started to see, sorry, it's the Invisalign again, but anyways, you started to see them start to go down on the generic ballot, and by August, Democrats were narrowly leading. Now they have gotten up to a 2 point lead over the Republicans. This has to do with Roe v. Wade. I'm telling you guys, I know that most of you guys understand that this is not good news for Republicans, and that the Labor Day surge actually benefited Democrats this time around. Um, but the people who just keep saying to throw out the polls, and are mocking others and calling us stupid, and not necessarily stupid, but we're not using our brains. So if you used your brains, you would know that some of these pollsters have overestimated Republicans or Democrats in the past. So we're smarter than you think, guys. Anyways, we're just going to get right into it. So this is a really good result for the Democratic Party. I do expect Democrats to still lose the House. I'll put out my new House predictions soon. I'm going to be doing them every month from now until, Election Day. So I'll put that out soon. And, yeah, I think the Republicans still narrowly win the House just because the numbers are so, favorable to them for redistricting and gerrymandering, though Democrats did do a good job as well. But I do think that what's going to happen is that, Republicans are narrowly going to take the House, but they are going to probably lose the Senate. And, they can still make up time here, but I mean, they're getting to the point now where they're starting to cancel ads in Arizona. Blake Masters is having a hard time in that Senate race, and they're just, they've now pulled out of the Ohio ninth House race, with Marcy Copter, which was not something I was expecting. J.R. Majewski has just kind of bombed his campaign now, so it looks like Copter might win at this point. That's going to be an interesting race to watch. It was already going to be close anyway, but it's just such a Republican trending district, and the fact that the GOP is actually giving up on it because they have such a bad candidate is quite fascinating. So I guess that's kind of a good transition into the next part. I forgot to mention that we're going to look at Joe Biden's approval. So, Biden has been getting better over the last couple months. Just On July 23rd, 2 months ago, he was down by 19 points, a solid 19 points, 57 to 38. Pretty bad for Biden, pretty much his lowest point. But as you know, as August started, it looked like the Biden was starting to, do a little bit better. And then he kind of went down a little bit as we went into September, and now he's going back up again. Now he's disapproved of by only 10 percentage points. And this is good for Biden. This is pretty much where he was, around the time of, late winter, early spring, around the springtime. The summer's really where, the late spring and early summer is just where Biden's approval just started to get demolished, but by the end of the summer, it started to, get better for him. And I don't think that Biden's approval is going to change too much between now and November, but I do think that it is going to get slightly better. I do think it'll get into the single digits. It'll probably not be as good as I was anticipating. The surge is not quite as small or is not quite as large, or I guess the speed of the surge is not quite as fast as I was predicting, but I do think he'll be down by, the high single digits by election day, and that's very good for Democrats because they've been really outperforming President Biden on the generic ballot, as you just saw. They're up by 2 points, and they're doing a lot better in some of these Senate races, but some of them are slipping out of their hands. So as you can see on the 538 forecast, Democrats are have a 71% chance at winning the Senate. That doesn't mean they'll get 71 senators. That just means they have a 71% chance of winning the Senate at all. Same for the GOP. So about a 2-1 margin in the Senate. Pretty good for Democrats, especially when you look at how it was just a couple of months ago before the Roe reversal. You can see Republicans were at a 60% chance. Now, in the House, it is Republicans only have a 68% chance, which still pretty, good for them, but it's a lot worse than it was previously. It's gone down in the past couple of days. You can look back at, when this forecast launched, or not when it launched, but when they started calculating numbers. Democrats didn't even have a 20, didn't barely had Republicans almost had a 90% chance of winning the House, and it's just been a really bad look for Democrats, but they've started to get better, and now they've gotten to a 30% chance at winning the House. And so right now, the 538's saying that the popular vote, Republicans are going to win by 2, and they're going to win 225 seats. So pretty slim majority means that the Democrats might be able to get the Senate back in 2024. Or not the Senate, the House back in 2024, but the Senate I think is going to be a lot harder. But that is a topic for another video. Now let's go to the latest polls. So we've been seeing, actually, we don't need to go over here. We can just go up here. We're going to look at the Senate polls right now. We got some interesting numbers out of a lot of these key Senate races. Let's start in Arizona, since I mentioned that originally. Mark Kelly in the 538 forecast leads by 7.5% against Blake Masters. Republicans have really been canceling pretty much all of their fundraising in the state of Arizona. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, in terms of, my exact statement there, but I do believe that they've been canceling a lot of ad buys in Arizona, and now they've been, pushing and pushing, funds to help Blake Masters. Mitch McConnell really seems like he's given up on this race. And the thing is, even though McConnell is someone that I really dislike, I trust him with these things because he has seen years such as 2010 and 2012 when Republicans had the numbers to get back the Senate, more so in 2012 than 2010, but they lost it because they nominated, extreme candidates, and this is a repeat of that. Now, I will say that the Masters has been doing better in the polling data. Trafalgar, which predicted Trump was going to win Arizona by, I think it was 3.5, has him down by 1, but this is him, but he's underperforming Kerry Lake by what's it, 5 points, I think. Kerry Lake was up by 4 in this poll. And in the state data for progress poll, it is a Democratic internal pollster. You have to remember that whenever people talk about data for progress, they don't mention the fact, or, when right wingers talk about data for progress, they just say it's a Democratic leaning pollster. They don't, say that, oh, they got the New York 19th election wrong by 10 points. They said that Molinaro was going to win that by 8, or, yeah, by 8, and he only won it by 2, or he lost it by 2. He didn't even win it. So take data for progress with a grain of salt. Trafalgar's been all over the place. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they've been really weird recently. Sorry, just got a message from somebody, but I will check that later. But as you can see, Masters still has yet to lead in a single poll, and we are, 40 or so, 45 days until Election Day. This is not good for Masters. You know, Republicans, Mark Kelly is a fundraising beast, and it was going to be hard to take him down, but this was a Republican, this was, an automatic target for the GOP. In 2020, Mark Kelly was supposed to win by around, the mid single digits. He only won by 2 points against Martha McSally, a pretty bad incumbent, a pretty bad senator, in terms of, electability. She lost to Kirsten Sinema by the exact same amount in 2018. And yeah, so she did overperform, but Arizona's polls do sometimes underestimate Democrats. They did so in 2018. They pretty much showed McSally nearly beating Sinema, but Sinema was able to come out on top in the end. The race wasn't called for, until about a week after Election Day. So Arizona is looking pretty good for Mark Kelly. I think he wins by around 3 or 4 points right now. He's really an overachiever. And he Blake Masters is not going to do well with the McCain voters in Maricopa County, and I think that Mark Kelly is on track for a fairly solid victory. I think that he's going to do better than he did in 2020 if everything holds up, but this race could get a lot narrower. Let's go to North Carolina next. Now, this is a state that I'm planning to talk about, make a video for soon. Ted Budd and Sherry Beasley in a very competitive race here. The Civics poll has Beasley up by 1, Budd is up by 2, Free, and then Beasley's up by 1 in this poll. So North Carolina is really all over the place. And yes, it is a state that has grossly overestimated Democrats in the past. They said they showed Cal Cunningham, or the polls in North Carolina showed Cal Cunningham consistently um, defeating Tom Tillis in the Senate race in 2020, but he lost it by 2 points, and I think that a lot of that did have to do with his sexting scandal. But it also had, with Cunningham's sexting scandal. But Tillis, is an overachiever at the same time. And the thing about Sherry Beasley is that she's, not necessarily, this white Democratic nominee that a lot of that has been so common in North Carolina for Senate and presidential elections. Biden was expected to win North Carolina. He should have with Harris on the ballot. But I think that, him being at the top of the ballot and it being a federal election, which is more, favorable to Republicans in North Carolina, I think that put Trump over the top in the end. Roy Cooper is white, but yet he won his governor election by 5 points in 2020 on the same ballot. So I think that Roy Cooper would be a very good choice for 2024 for president. And I think it would have been a good choice here, but Sherry Beasley is an African American. She, she barely lost her race in 2020, and when I mean barely, I mean like 0.004% or something crazy like that. She came extremely close to holding on to her Supreme Court seat in North Carolina. They do statewide elections for Supreme Court justices in the state. And, she can bring out black voters that have been, a little hesitant to come out in large numbers for Democrats. Not necessarily that they don't vote for Democrats, but just because, with North Carolina becoming more, well, not necessarily, not, it is trending Democratic, I guess you could say, or it is, shifting leftward. I think it'll be a blue state in the future, but with population increasing in North Carolina, Democrats have had a hard time winning the state because they haven't been able to get tremendously good numbers in some of these, keys in, some of these key African American areas. Beasley, I think, can do that. Now, I still expect the polls to be wrong. I think that Budd wins by 1 or 2 points as of right now, but that could change. North Carolina could be a sleeper race this November, but, I want to, be apprehensive about it considering how wrong the polls were in 2020. When we go to Ohio, we can see here, let me go back. We can see the JD Vance and Tim Ryan are in such a close race. They are pretty much neck and neck. We've seen a lot of new polls come out of Ohio, some showing Vance and Ryan leading. And I think the interesting thing about this is really, maybe more confident in Vance, the fact that he's leading by he that he's leading in some of these polls, whereas in the summer, Tim Ryan was destroying him. But I think also showing him leading by these narrow margins, it does make me, and Tim Ryan leading by narrow margins, it does make me more confident in Vance. I am tempted to put Ohio back into likely Republican by, my next Senate election cycle. I guess spoiler alert, but we'll see if that holds up because Ohio's polls, do usually overestimate Democrats by quite a bit. But this race is getting surprisingly more competitive. You saw it was pretty solid for Tim Ryan in the summer, and we kind of shrugged off those polls. But now the fact that we're still, we're around September, and while Vance has made an improvement, he's still neck and neck with Ryan, and Republicans have had to put money into this race. They're probably going to have to put it into North Carolina too, considering how Ted Budd's kind of slacking off, and so is J.D. Vance. So I think Republicans, while Ted Budd, was a much better candidate than Vance, they got to get their act together in these two states because if they lose these two states, they're not winning the Senate, especially if it's Ohio. They're not. They're not going to win it if it's North Carolina. If North Carolina goes to Beasley either, but Ohio was a state that was pretty much locked for the GOP. Rob Portman would have easily won his reelection. Had he ran again. But he decided not to. But it was still considered, a likely red state by many, including me. When Vance won the nomination in 2022 in May of this year, I kind of thought, no, this race is kind of over. Ryan's a good candidate, but I think Republicans kind of got their act together in Ohio. Well, they clearly haven't. They are struggling, to get Vance, to be able to, not screw himself, or not shoot himself in the foot, I guess is the right term. Josh Mandel would have been a bad candidate, but he's at least run a campaign before. Vance is a first time candidate, and that's the problem with a lot of these, Republican nominees, especially in the Senate. They have Dr. Oz in, I almost said New Jersey, in Pennsylvania. Um, you have Blake Masters in Arizona. You have Herschel Walker in Georgia. You got J.D. Vance in Ohio. Don Bolduc. Actually, no, Don Bolduc's run before, but he's not a very good candidate either. So yeah, that's all I gotta say on Ohio. Wisconsin's been improving for Ron Johnson. He now leads by barely anything in the polls. I did not see this new Trafalgar poll that showed Johnson up by 4 or by 2. I have seen a lot of these polls though, and so Mandela Barnes' lead is kind of collapsing a little bit. He's still neck and neck with Johnson in a lot of these polls, but considering how Republicans have been widely underestimated in Wisconsin polls in the past, I think that we can say I think right now Johnson will win by around maybe 2 or 3%. I think that I don't think this race is a likely margin is attainable for Johnson. You could have coerced me into putting it as that, back in like the early summer and midsummer. I did briefly have Wisconsin as a blue state a couple of weeks ago after that Alaska special election and Trafalgar showing Johnson down by 2. Now they show him up by 2. That's actually kind of coincidental. Complete flip. Barnes was at 49%. Now he's at 47, and reverse that for Johnson. So Johnson has been doing quite well. Emerson has him up by 4. The NRSC only has him up by 4, which should be concerning. But I mean, I think he's not going to do that well. We have him up by 1. So he's doing a lot better. He's surging in the polls, and I think it's because Republicans have had to pay attention to Wisconsin. They kind of wrote it off as, oh, Mandela Barnes is too, left wing to realistically win. And a lot of I thought that too. I thought Barnes has a chance, but I mean it's not that great of a chance. He'll make it close, but because Wisconsin's a competitive state. But it was really late August that I started to realize, oh wait, Barnes can actually win this race. And it does seem to be getting a little bit worse for him, but Republicans have had to, put on attack ads in Wisconsin because if they lose Wisconsin, it's another state that's an automatic, Democratic majority. This would be a pickup for Democrats. But considering Johnson's massive outperformance of polls in 2016 against Russ Feingold, I just don't see Barnes being able to win right now, but he could, he'll do better in Milwaukee, but I think he'll just get destroyed in a lot of Western white working class Wisconsin, and that's going to hurt him. And so, yeah, I think Johnson will win by, a fair amount, but it'll still be close. I think it'll be closer than 2016, and Wisconsin polls are not nearly as inaccurate. Were not nearly as inaccurate in 2018 as they were in 2020. So I think Trump not being on the ballot says something. I think yeah, I think Johnson wins by a fairly narrow margin. I think Barnes does slightly better than Russ Feingold because Democratic turnout will be up. This race could still be tilted. I am giving away a little bit of my predictions here, but we'll just have to see if that translates into into by the time I release my next prediction. In Nevada, we've also been we've seen some polls where Adam Laxalt is now catching up to Cortez Masto. But I will say that, considering Nevada's massive polling errors in years past that have benefited the Republicans, it's, quite unique how Nevada, oversamples Republicans quite a bit or overestimates them in polling. Um, when it comes to the general election. I think Cortez Masto is currently favored right now. She'll get good turnout from Clark County. She'll do worse in Washoe in and Northern Nevada than Biden did in 2020, but I think she will do better with Hispanic voters, particularly Hispanic women. Sorry, I'm talking really fast. Yeah, I think she'll do better with Hispanic women. Laxalt's a good candidate, but the fact that he only won his attorney general's race by, a hair in 2014 when Republicans, won the governorship by a large margin with Brian Sandoval, I think that that says a lot. And, Cortez Masto, I think, is an underrated incumbent, so I think she wins narrowly here, but it could, she hasn't led in a poll since August, so that is concerning for her. But all four of these polls have really overestimated Republicans in the state. In the past, I think Emerson College is the one the Cortez Masto should be the most concerned about, and even then, they only have Laxalt up by one. They've overestimated Republicans in Nevada in the past. There's also a lot of undecideds here, as you can see. You can't see the undecided number right here, but you know what I mean. So, anyways, we're gonna go for the rest of these states. Georgia has been getting a little bit closer, but Warnock has been doing a little bit better in the polling data. Data for progress, guys. What did I say about the New York special election? Warnock's probably up by more. I think that this race is going to be really close, but I think that Walker just doesn't have it in him to be able to get good enough turnout to block Warnock from winning. I think that he can force Warnock into a runoff, but that's really hurting Walker more than it is his opponent. I think Warnock would win by, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 points in a runoff. But I think in the general election, it's pretty much, the election day vote is pretty much a statistical tie. But I think Warnock has a narrow advantage here in the state of Georgia. So yeah, and Georgia's polls have been really accurate too. Florida, we've been seeing that Rubio, and Demians are, in a fairly competitive race, which has made me, has tempted me to maybe change my characterization about Florida. It is a right trending state, and Rubio has won by large margins in the past, but these poll numbers should be pretty concerning for him. You know, I think that I still think that Florida, considering its, overestimation of Democrats in polling in the past, I think it is going to vote for, Rubio by 5, 6, maybe even 7 points, but I think it will be closer than 2016 when he won by 8. I think he is going to underperform Ron DeSantis when, which is not something I would have said a little while ago. I would have said there's a possibility, but I think, Rubio was a stronger incumbent and, Val Demings didn't really seem to have a chance, but now she kind of does have a well, no, she doesn't have a realistic chance. Don't yell at me, all right, conservative cowboy. But anyways, I think the Demings does have, a somewhat of a chance. I think in a best case scenario for her, she could win, but I still think Rubio wins by a pretty strong amount, considering, his electoral success in the past. But he is certainly, he should be concerned about these poll numbers, which, show pretty grim results for him. In Iowa, Chuck Grassley, they now have a polling average. Grassley does seem like he's underperforming quite a bit in the state. It does, Grassley has been, underperforming his 2016 polls, in his 2016 margin when he won by 25%. The polarization's catching up to Grassley, and I do think that, you know, even, the thing about 2016 is that they did originally show a competitive race between him and Patty Judge, but it just really, by September around this time, it just really didn't seem to, solidify. Grassley started to pull away in the polls. He was already leading in the ones before that, but by much smaller margins. And the fact that he's still, struggling even in Republican-sponsored polls or Republican-leaning pollsters, in Seltzer and Co., which is, a very accurate source in Iowa. They got 2020 right with Trump winning by high single digits when everyone else said it was, going to be really close or, a narrow Trump victory. So, I do think Grassley does outperform his polling average by quite a bit. I think he wins by 13 or 14 points, just under a safe margin. I do think that, by probability, this race is safe. Iowa is not going to flip for Democrats unless something insane happens, unless Grassley just really screws up, or I don't know. Something, big would have to happen. God would need to, I don't know. Yeah, they would need to make Chuck Grassley a Democrat essentially, and then something might happen, but then even then he might even win. So yeah, something crazy would have to happen for Iowa to go blue, but I think it will be a fairly competitive race. This video is going on really long. In New Hampshire, Hassan's doing pretty well against Bolduc. She's leading by pretty large amounts against him. Bolduc does seem to be moderating his campaign in New Hampshire, but I still do not think that Bolduc can realistically win. He could in a best case scenario, but I just don't, but even then, that's kind of based on realistic standards. I think Chuck Morse would have been a much better choice for Republicans in the state. But yeah, I think New Hampshire's kind of gone for the GOP. They would have had such an easier time with Chris Sununu. Okay, I gotta hurry this up. This is getting really long. Colorado, Bennett is doing pretty well against O'Dea. I think we got a new poll. Yeah, an Emerson poll that showed Bennett up by 10 points against Joe O'Dea. I think that this race could get to the double digits for Bennett, looking at the election shuffler and just how well O'Dea would have to do, how much he would have to improve in the rural areas and the suburbs, which I don't necessarily doubt he can do, but Bennett is a strong incumbent, and Colorado is a left trending state. I think that O'Dea will do a lot better than Trump in the suburbs, but, his rural margins are gonna, probably stay the same around there. So it's not gonna be a huge difference. Let's get into the last couple of states. Pennsylvania, Fetterman is leading by about 9 points against Oz. He's reached 50% in this polling average, which means even, if Oz gets the remaining undecided vote, if Fetterman is indeed at, a majority of the vote, he'd still win. And Oz just really hasn't seemed to catch up to Fetterman. There have been polls, like Trafalgar, which predicted Trump would win in Pennsylvania in 2020. Spoiler alert, he didn't. And they do show the race getting a little bit closer, but that was expected. And Fetterman, has agreed to debate Oz now, and I think that his electoral appeal in Pennsylvania is a really good sign for him. I don't believe he's up by 21 points, but that is still a good sign for Fetterman. It gives him a lot of room to fall. And if Fetterman is, if Democrats are up, if Oz is down, by the same amount on election day, I could seriously see Pennsylvania being a likely D state. I don't think it'll happen, and I do think the polls will be slightly wrong. I think if the election were held today, Fetterman wins by 3 or 4 points, but I could see it going up to 5 percentage points. I don't think it's, necessarily out of the question. Now let's go to the last two states, which, are kind of new to me. I haven't really seen much polling data out of Missouri and Washington. Schmidt, does seem to be struggling against Trudy Bush Valentine in this race, but, it's going to go Republican. She would have been in a much better position had Greitens won the GOP nomination. And with the independent candidate out of the race, Schmidt's going to be just fine. It's Missouri. And in Washington, Patty Murray, is doing pretty well against Tiffany Smiley. We've seen some pretty big, we have seen this ridiculous Trafalgar poll, which predicted Democrats were doing better in Colorado and Pennsylvania than they were in Washington. They showed Murray only up by 3 points. And Murray's doing pretty well in all these pollsters. So anyways, after that long rant, and this was just kind of a video to update you guys on everything, to make a video. I think I'm going to make a new 2024, an updated 2024 presidential election prediction between Biden and Trump. And I think I'm going to try to do some of Biden versus DeSantis and vice versa, because we're getting closer to 2024. We're getting more polls out of out of the states and out of, the national, pollsters and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna try to get on those predictions so that by the time that these candidates decline to run or decide to run, we can get a better picture of what's gonna happen. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, share it, turn on notifications so you don't miss another one of my videos. Check out my comrades channel, Growlings666, and check out my other channel, Interactor127, my non-political channel. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya when I predict the future.